Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. My name is Tina Podlodowski. I'm chair of the Washington State Democratic Party, and just really pleased to have everybody here tonight. I'm gonna do about a 35-minute presentation, and then we will open it up for questions from any and everyone, and everything is fair game. If you want to talk about the Democratic Party at a national level, at a local level, talk about issues, I may not be able to answer all your issue questions, but I do think that State Senator Sam Hunt can answer all those issue questions. Or perhaps our amazing Thurston County Auditor, Mary Hall. She can do our voter questions. You do know you have the best auditor in the state of Washington in Thurston County. Absolutely, positively, for sure. So why don't I talk a little bit about the work that we're doing in the party, but by way of that, let me tell you a little bit about me, too. And because, growing up, most, kids, state party chair, it's not really on the list, astronaut, whatever, and growing up and what you want to be when you grow up. And it was a bit of a journey for me to get here as well. But really, as state party chair, my job is pretty simple. It's two words. It's win elections. And it really is win elections for Democrats and for candidates that really hold our progressive values. And for me, that was a journey that started as I grew up. I'm a first-generation kid. Both my mom and dad were Polish immigrants who were refugees from World War II. My dad actually fought in a Polish unit as part of the British Army. Met my mom in a displaced persons camp. They both came over here and landed in a place called New Britain, Connecticut. I don't know if there's any folks who grew up on the East Coast. There you go, New Britain, there you go. And luckily for both of them and for me and for our family, they were able to trade their respective jobs as a gardener and a maid for being machinists. And both my mom and dad worked at Fafner Bearing. They were union machinists, so the fact that we're here at Washington State Labor Council building means a lot. And the fact that they were union machinists, my dad was a UAW shop steward, meant that our family had living wages. It meant that they could buy their first house, their first and only house. It meant that I was first kid in our family to be able to go to college. And I turned that into a degree in computer engineering, one of the first women to get that kind of degree, and turned that into a career at a company across the lake from Seattle called Microsoft. And I was at Microsoft, ran businesses here in the U.S. and around the world. As a result of that experience, though, thought that wasn't quite enough. So ran and won a seat on the Seattle City Council. And while on City Council, worked on a variety of different issues, everything from land use issues to policing issues, put together the first municipal civilian police oversight in the country, the Office of Police Accountability in Seattle, as well as things like municipal legislation around a cable customer bill of rights. So in Seattle, through our cable office, if Comcast is late, you can actually get money from Comcast to be able to do that work, and a whole other set of things. I went from there to running some large nonprofits, Big Brothers Big Sisters, as well as Lifelong AIDS Alliance, to going back into the for-profit world until public service sort of drew me back, and it was a day. I'm a mom of three. My youngest was looking at kindergarten classrooms in our public schools, and my phone started to erupt. And it was phone calls from home and texts and emails, and it was the day of the Sandy Hook shooting, which is about 30 miles from where I grew up. And as a result of that, I went into work the next day, quit my job, and became one of the co-founders of the Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility. From there, we did the work to put together Initiative 594, and running that statewide campaign led me to running for Secretary of State last year, and many of you here in the room helped me out with that campaign, and I just want to say thank you for that. But that journey taught me a lot about the state of Washington and the state of our Democratic Party and the needs that we have as a Democratic Party. So here I am as state party chair and doing that work. As you look from the outside into the state of Washington, I think around the country, people think of us as the bluest of blue, the truest of true blue, that we are a state that is nothing but, Democrats living out in the wild, doing whatever we do here in Puget Sound region. But as we all know, that's not really true. Right? We've not been immune to what's been happening around the country, particularly for the Democratic Party over the course of the last 10 years. If you look around the country, we have lost, over the last decade, more than 1,100 legislative seats. 1,100 of them. in those losing those various seats, we've also lost control of a lot of what happens at the statewide level. There are currently only 6 states in the country where Democrats have that holy trinity sort of the governor's office, as well as the state Senate, as well as the state House. But the Republicans, they have 32 states. 32. Now, why that's important is because if you think about the fact that we've got a Republican president, a Republican House, a Republican Senate, you only need 36 states or control of 36 states to call a constitutional convention and make changes in our Constitution. And that's really scary, how close we are to making that happen. And for many of us who might have done work on the Equal Rights Amendment, it's a lot of effort to try to get a constitutional amendment in. We never made it to that. But here in Washington State, we haven't been immune to that. Friday, could you go back? Thank you. I'll let you know. Go back. I'll let you know when to advance them. Yeah, so here, in the last 10 years, we've gone from a 15-seat majority in the state Senate to a 1-seat minority. Next slide. And then in the state House, we've gone from a 28-seat majority to a 2-seat majority. Go to the next slide. And the thing that actually concerns me most is looking at what's happening at the local level. Sort of Republican control of county councils and what that means in terms of local politics. Because it's not just those legislative seats. The Republicans have also had a terrific strategy to go after, seats from the schoolhouse all the way to the Senate. So school boards, city councils, PUDs, fire districts, county councils, all of those different places, and they built a pretty deep bench in making that happen. I think redistricting as well, when we went through that 10 years ago, in many ways we thought, you could still stand at the top of the Space Needle and have all the votes you need to win a statewide race, which we know is not true. But folks ceded a lot of central and eastern Washington from that standpoint. And it has taken a toll for us in the state. I know for Sam, it is no fun being in the minority in the Senate. It's not how we get work done. We couldn't pass a capital budget through in this particular cycle. But also, Republicans control most auditor offices. And you could take a look at this and see where things are nonpartisan or things are blue, but a lot of those blue places are really red. In fact, I would say that the 2 most progressive auditors in the state of Washington one sits right here in Thurston County, the other sits in Kitsap County, and then it falls off considerably after that. And why is that important? Well, a couple of things. We have about 4.3 million registered voters in the state of Washington, but we have about 1.6 million people who are eligible to be registered to vote who are not registered to vote. And those folks kind of fall into 4 different categories: young people, communities of color, women, people who make less than $50,000 a year. County auditors have a lot of say and a lot of sway in the ways that people vote and the way that they get access to the ballot box. So, for example, one of the places I started my Secretary of State race was up in Clallam County in Neah Bay, in the corner of the state right over there. And what's interesting about Neah Bay is that it's home to the Makah Indian tribe, and the Makah vote at 97% in tribal elections, but 17% in statewide elections. So I wanted to ask the question, you have a community that has a culture of voting. How come they're voting in tribal elections? How come they're not voting in statewide elections? And so asked the tribal council, and they said, well, we need a drop box. I said, a drop box? Drop box, $1,000, $2,000 for a piece of iron for a drop box. I said, surely we can get you a drop box. And they said, you know what, if you're elected Secretary of State and get us a drop box, we'll hold a party in your honor, because we've been asking for a drop box for 10 years. And in all of Clallam County, there are 3 drop boxes, none of which are anywhere near where the Makah or in the rural areas. There's one in Port Angeles, there's one in Sequim, and there's one in Forks, and that's it. If you take a look at Yakima County, with a large Latino population, Yakima County has just a handful of drop boxes, and most of them sit at the Yakima County Courthouse, and that's about it. So the power of these local elected auditors is incredible, especially when you start to think about how many people are putting their ballots in drop boxes for want of a stamp. and a stamp is a big issue. It's tough to get one stamp these days. We don't have the stores on every corner where you can get one stamp. And for some folks, a stamp is an issue when you take a look at the whole process of how tight family budgets have become in this day and age. So all of these are components of depressing the voting system in that way. At the same time, Republicans have taken more and more control and really talked about more and more issues in ways that frame what they do, as opposed to us being there and framing Democratic values. Let's go to the next slide. So Republicans in elections, I am always convinced that Republicans will have more money to run elections, but that's okay because we'll always have more people and we'll have people doing the work to win these elections. But over the last 10 years, we've lost some of that edge as well. So there's a great book you can read if you haven't. It's called Dark Money by a woman named Jane Mayer that really talks about the Koch brothers' money and influence in politics. And dark money will really scare you about the amount of money that's been spent on an interlocking set of organizations and campaigns and nonprofits sort of designed to depress the vote, send out misinformation. And in fact, we've kind of have one here in Washington State that does a lot of this work. It's called the Freedom Foundation as well. But what's happened, I think, in looking at where we make a difference. It's in canvassing, it's in door knocking, it's in phone banking, it's in texting, it's in doing all those things. And coming out as state party chair 8 months ago, we ran the numbers and saw all the declines in what was happening with canvassing and calls and actual conversations with voters. And at the same time, that first level Democratic elected official, a PCO, a precinct committee officer, we had a 60% PCO vacancy rate here in the state of Washington. If you don't have people on the ground doing this work, it's really, really difficult to be able to make that kind of contact with voters, make a difference, understand their concerns, and understand their issues. So to reframe what we're doing as a Democratic Party, I like to say that activism is the energy that drives our party. And our party is a big tent. I don't care if you come in through a Democratic Party organization, or if you come in through Indivisible, or if you come in through Our Revolution, or Code Blue, or Swing Left, or a whole set of other different organizations. I actually don't even care if you want to put the letter D by your name ever. This should all be about a values match. And I have to say, when you think about all of those organizations and the work that we do, there is a progressive values match there that should really overcome any issues that we might have on a particular piece of policy, because we have something more and better to be able to do in doing this work. And that's a lot of the work that we're trying to drive through what the party does and how the party organizes differently. So our party mission, again, it's 2 words. That's my job description: win elections. And so how do we do that? How do we make that change in winning elections here in Washington State? Well, the first thing is to engage our activists and supporters every day. It's not enough just to walk your precinct once a year or just to talk to voters once a year. And in fact, that's how we've been thinking about elections, really, in these 2-year cycles. And every 2 years, we seem to reinvent the cycle or reinvent the work that we're going to do. And within that 2-year cycle, there's a period of about 6 months where we run something called a coordinated campaign. Many of you might have been part of a coordinated campaign last year because it was a presidential year. And a coordinated campaign has a statewide office holder at the top of the ticket. In 2018, we'll run it again because Maria Cantwell will be up for re-election. But that coordinated campaign really gets out to a certain set of voters for about 6 months out of the year. And for 18 months, we are not out there for the most part in organizing and talking to voters. I liken that to, I don't know, a Starbucks only being open for 6 months out of every 2 years. And during that 6 months, all they're doing is yelling at people, essentially, buy my coffee, buy my coffee, buy my coffee. Not what kind of coffee do you like? Do you have a particular concern about this kind of coffee? All of that stuff, just pushing our candidate or pushing our campaign at them as opposed to engaging them and being a part of their lives. So that's something different that we're trying to do in engaging our supporters in the work that we do. Honing our message and building our narrative. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that, at least from my perspective, the Republicans owned the message in the last presidential election. Make America Great Again was a great slogan. It sold a lot of Trump hats, but people had a perspective of it and what that meant for them, which didn't necessarily equate to what it meant for Donald Trump, because I think it meant a lot more money in his pocket, frankly. But we need to do that and build our narrative and tell our stories about our values. We also need to recruit, train, and plan to win 8 years ahead. And what this means is, if you think about that map that I showed you of the state of Washington that was so red, there are places in the state of Washington that we are not going to win in 2 years. But that's okay. We still should run candidates and run hard in those elections and continue to run, because over time we will get those places back. That's something I fundamentally believe in. Collecting and analyzing voter data and relationship data is something we also haven't done all that well. How many folks have used Vote Builder here? Raise your hands. Okay, a lot of folks who've done some canvassing in Vote Builder access. You'll know that our Vote Builder data is nowhere near what it should be to be able to have voter information and understand the values of those voters. And here's something that happened in the last presidential election that the Republicans did extraordinarily well, and that was build, as a consumer marketing model, build segmentation. And information about individuals, in fact, about everybody here in this room, to be able to use digital media to communicate to you. At its peak, the Trump campaign was sending out somewhere around 175,000 different messages on a daily basis that were segmented to Facebook, to Twitter, to any other place where you might have been online and seen those messages. And they created consumer profiles about each and every one of you, to the point where they could say that a woman who lived on the even side of the street, who was married with 2.2 kids and drove a blue minivan, voted this way, and this was the piece of message we should send out to her. Democrats had nothing like this to be able to do that and make that happen. Now, I'm not suggesting that we want to invade your privacy and strip that data and do that sort of work, but we can be a lot better about understanding what is important to you and what issues you care about, and how we frame our values and our candidates in ways that match with your issues and values as well. And then the last thing is just collaborating as a strong progressive partner, whether it's with our union brothers and sisters, whether it's with our tribal partners, whether it's with our diverse communities. The Democratic Party can't just say, come and vote for us during election time. We need to get out of our chairs and be there for individuals when they're there. And certainly in Olympia, you've seen that happen, folks there for the DACA rallies and working with Dreamers and so many other things that have been out there. But the party needs to be there as well. Next slide. So in 2017, we're a state that has the most special legislative district elections in the country. We've got 8 of them. And we have the only legislative district election in the country that can flip a chamber from red to blue. And that's the 45th District Senate race. And that's Monka Dingbra's race. Have folks heard of Monka and the work in the 45th? Yeah. So that race will be it's the #1 race in the country for a legislative race. It will also be the most expensive legislative district race in the history of the state of Washington. When you run in a legislative district race, maybe it's a $100,000 race, a $200,000 race. This race is going to come in somewhere between $7 to $8 million when it's all said and done. That's a gubernatorial race. That's a Senate race. That's a lot of money, and a lot of money that can be spent on other things. But it's also a race that the Republicans know that they're going to lose, and they are throwing everything at it, including the kitchen sink and including that amount of money to try to win it. But I do believe that we'll end up winning it and prevailing, but we're not going to stop. It's less than 30 days to Election Day. Ballots drop next week. We are going to put the pedal to the metal to make sure that we win that and win that particular race. So that's an important race. We've got other races that are up to LD 48, which is right kind of next to LD 45 on Seattle's east side suburbs. 2 great folks, Patty Kuderer, who's a state senator, and then Vandana Slatter, state representative. Both of them are in a blue district. They should be fine given their primary results, but we want to make sure that they win. LD 37 is sort of the heart of Seattle. It's Pramila Jayapal's old district, and Rebecca Saldana is the state senator there. I feel that it's so blue that it sort of looks black there because Rebecca doesn't even have an opponent. She's going to be quite fine. But to me, the 2 most interesting districts of this cycle, and where as a state party we're spending a lot of time and energy and some money as well, are Legislative Districts 31 and Legislative District 7. Here's why. Let me start with LD7. LD7 is the upper right-hand corner of the state of Washington. It is where Idaho and Canada come together with the state of Washington. It is the largest district geographically in the state of Washington, 11,000 square miles, 5 different counties: Okanagan, Stevens, Ferry, Pend Oreille, and a little bit of Spokane County. It is a county where Democrats have not cracked 30% of the vote in 20 years. It is a legislative district where Democrats haven't even bothered to run a candidate for 11 years. It is a county that is so red that back when Initiative 594, which is background checks for guns, ran in the state of Washington, Initiative 594 won in 48 of 49 legislative districts. And the only legislative district it lost in was Legislative District 7. So that is exactly, as a state party chair, where I want to go to figure out why we are losing and why we are losing these particular voters. Because if you go back in time and you go back to the early 1990s, that was a true blue district. So what's changed to make that district happen and work through it? So here's what we did. We recruited two terrific candidates, Karen Hardy, who's running for state senate, and Karen and her husband have a horse business in Stevens County. I always call her my candidate with a horse, a dog, and a gun. She's perfect for the 7th district. And Karen it literally has been riding her horse across the district with all the fairs and the rodeo stuff and all of that happens there, which is terrific. She's running for state senate, and then we've got a great gal, Susan Swanson, who's running for the state house. Susan is a Vietnam veteran. She worked for the federal government for a number of years, putting together educational programs for active duty military and their family, and she and her husband now own a business in Okanagan County, and both are moms as well. And what's been interesting about this particular race is getting candidates out there and uncovering the Democrats where they are, and uncovering people who want to vote Democratic who just didn't think they had a hope in that particular district. So our goal with Karen and with Susan was not to win the district, although I got to tell you, they are both like working and they really do want to win that district. And they're going to run this year and they're going to run next year too in the regular cycle as well. But to move the needle from 30% to 38% in that district in Democratic turnout, from 30 to 38%. Now, why is that important? Well, 38% is the best that Patty Murray ever did in that district. And Patty Murray is sort of the bellwether in these red districts in being able to cross over into different kinds of voters and get people to think about a politician in a completely different way. But in that particular district, LD7, it is wholly contained in Congressional District 5. Congressional District 5 is Kathy McMorris Rogers' seat. And I need rural areas to turn out at 38% in Congressional District 5 to have Lisa Brown beat Kathy McMorris Rogers in the next cycle. So that's exactly why we want to do this and do this work. And it's incredibly important to be able to do that and also learn different kinds of techniques around rural organizing. Because Democrats, I think, in Washington State over the last 10 years, we got this urban thing down, right, in terms of door knocking and all this stuff. You are not door knocking in the 7th Legislative District. It is 1 to 5 miles between neighbors. There are some population areas we can get to and door knock, but it's not the rest. So we've tried a variety of different things, whether it is the door knocking or the phone banking or different email programs that we have in place or texting. And I got to say, the thing that scored the highest was our texting programs. In the primary, we were able to increase Democratic turnout in Pend Oreille County, our test county, by 28% using texting. And you have to understand, too, in that area, the cell phone service is terrible. So people don't always get their calls, but they do always get their texts. And they are reading their texts, and we were able to turn out. So that was really important. Legislative District 31, former home of Pam Roach, now on the Pierce County Council. So LD 31, why is that so important? Well, number one, we want to win it. It's South King County and parts of Pierce County, Auburn sort of being the biggest city there, Enumclaw, Black Diamond, that whole area. But Legislative District 31 is wholly contained in Congressional District 8, Dave Reichert's old district. You remember Dave Reichert, right? The guy who's been so scared by Democrats he retired instead of running this year. That's Dave Reichert, yeah. So we're going to go after him in that district. And again, it's ticking up those numbers because the 31st Legislative District, the 5th Legislative District, and the 47th Legislative District are the districts that are the keys to winning Congressional District 8. And darn it, I intend to get that district back for Democrats as well next year. So 2 congressional pickups and holding on to the House and the Senate as well. Let's go to the next slide. So our strategy, how do we make those changes? Well, the first is organizing. You know, the state party has never had full-time organizers or people who are out there training folks like you to do door knocking, phone banking, texting programs, using a whole variety of our texting tools. So that's what we invested in this year, was organizing. We've got an organizing director. We've got 4 organizers here in the state, plus 2 folks on the data side to be able to do this sort of work. It's about cleaning the data in Vote Builder, but it's also about folks who are out there doing the work to talk to voters and see what their issues are. So that was incredibly important. Also, we needed to change a bunch of our technology tools. So scale different aspects of our technology tools. So we've developed something called eCanvass. What eCanvass does is not exactly what the Trump administration did, but a little bit different. You can log into our eCanvass system and let's say Mary Hall, it'll say in eCanvass, we don't take your data, but we use it for a minute. So you have 15 different data sources that you could check off as boxes. Your Gmail contacts, your Facebook contacts, your LinkedIn contacts. We then run that information against the voter database and the voter reg database, and we're able to say, okay, Mary, here are your 15 friends that are not registered to vote. Here are your 25 friends who only vote in 1 out of every 4 elections. And here are your 10 friends who happen to live in the 45th district. Do you want to send them an email right now to tell them to vote for Moncadingra in the general election? So that's something that we can do, and we want to scale that and map all of those relationships as well in making that happen. We also have a new app to make canvassing easier. It's called Knock 10. If you've done canvassing, you've probably done it with pieces of paper. Maybe you use Minivan, the handheld one. This is sort of sits on top of Minivan and makes canvassing really easy. So you don't have to cut turf or decide which houses to knock or whatever. We pre-cut everything at the state party, and with Knock 10, it geolocates where you are and tells you the 10 closest doors you should be knocking. And the script that you need to do that knocking is right there on your phone. So the questions that you want to ask, the people that you want to talk to, they're all a part of the app to make that happen. And I'll show you how we use that this year for organizing in the state. And then we've launched something as well called the 7229 Project. Does anybody know why that number is important? Yes, ma'am. Exactly. There are 7,229 precincts in the state of Washington. So for us, if we could get that many PCOs, number one is we'd have an army of people doing this work. But number two, we need to give them tools. So we're developing an app for those PCOs that has all the demographic data about your precinct. It has all the voting data about your precinct. And then we're going to be asking you to talk to voters in your precinct, not just walking it once a year, but talking to voters every few weeks. And not talking to everybody, but maybe 10. You know, and you could do it via an email, you could do it via door knocking, you could do it via phone banking, you could do it via text, but to get their opinion on issues. And imagine the power of that. Say we had 5,000 PCOs in the state of Washington, and they talked to 10 people every 2 weeks. That's 50,000 people we'd be surveying every 2 weeks in the state of Washington on a particular issue. It's the cheapest poll I'll ever buy on issues, and it will tell me a lot of demographic data and information data about the issues and cares and concerns around the state of Washington in a variety of different places. Next slide. So a goal here is to reconstruct our vote builder IDs and then also do, many of you might have been a part of Summer of Canvas. Friday, let's go to the next slide so I can kind of explain Summer of Canvas. And our goal is to, hit 60,000 doors this summer and fall, because we've got 27 more canvases left to go if you're interested in canvassing. Callie in the back can hook you up for sure on your way out. And the idea here is to talk to the people that we never really talk to, or the people who actually swing elections in the state of Washington. So, in campaigns, the Democrats who always vote, we never really talk to you. We might send you 10 mail pieces by accident, but we never really talk to you. In traditional coordinated campaigns, they really are about getting out the vote. And so it's really about talking to those Democrats who sometimes vote. And we spend an awful lot of money and an awful lot of effort to get to those folks. Summer of Canvas and the continuing efforts, because it doesn't stop really, is to talk to those Democrats who rarely vote and then all of those independents in the middle. And to try to understand and not talk to them in ways that tie them to a candidate, but to understand their values around different issues. And at the end of the presentation, I'll show you a slide with the 5 sort of intersectional issues that we got out of all of those conversations over the summer in talking to folks. Because again, these are the people who are going to swing elections one way or the other. So let's take a look at impact in 2018 of kind of Summer of Canvas. And each one of those blue dots is a canvas or a voter contact effort throughout the state of Washington. So literally from doing no organizing and canvassing out of cycle, we've gone to talking to tens and tens of thousands of voters through these particular efforts. And you can see that the effort kind of swung through the Puget Sound region, which makes sense because that's where some of the electoral efforts were. But take a look at the 7th District. Because the 7th District is a place where if you were to look last year, you wouldn't have seen a single blue dot. You wouldn't have seen anyone talking to voters in the 7th District. And I have to say, in the 7th, it's been fairly amazing to see the reaction to folks. In places where people are door knocking, they're getting the, oh, you know what, I'm a Democrat, don't bother talking to me because I know there are no Democrats on the ballot. And they're going, whoa, wait a minute, there are Democrats on the ballot. You know, folks are saying that they're excited about the energy that's happening in the 7th District. They're excited about being able to talk about their issues. Have folks here been to Republic, Washington? Do you know where Republic is in the 7th? Right. Okay, so on primary night, I was in Republic, Washington, and 85 people showed up at the Republic Brewing Company for a primary night party. Nobody thought there was 85 people in all of the 7th District, right, that were Democrats. And 85 people showed up, you know, in Republic. And they were kind of like, wait a minute, you're a Democrat and you're a Democrat? And it's a part of connecting people and connecting community. Because ultimately, at a time when we have news sources that we cannot trust, when we have a president who tweets his every thought like he's a demented 2-year-old, you know, people are looking. Oh, well, you know what? That's not saying nice things about 2-year-olds. So, yeah. Yeah. But people are looking for connections with people that they do trust about different issues, about candidates, about how they talk about these sorts of things, and we connect community. And fundamentally, I believe that making this change as a party, and again, it takes time, but it does bear this out, and having those trusted contacts, people who will tell you, no, that's not right, or no, that's crazy. You know, when the Trump campaign and, you know, the Russian bots or whatever were all sending things out to you, if you were a hardcore Democrat, you were probably getting the messages on Facebook or on Twitter that, you know, Hillary was a space alien, Chelsea was stealing money from the UN, Bill was being Bill. You could believe whatever you want about Bill, but, you know, all those sorts of messages that were out there in working those things. And, it depressed vote in people, and it started arguments and all of that sort of stuff. So these are places that we're looking to go. And my goal is, you know, by 2020, when we're up for another presidential race, that entire map should be blue of people who are engaged and activated and talking to their neighbors and connected to folks. So communications is also a big part of this. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter or our week in review, I'd strongly encourage you to do that. We try to give you the best of what's happening in the week and what's happening here in the state of Washington. But we need to build our narrative and to build our story as well as a party, because we really haven't had one. We also haven't had a communications person at the party for 10 years as well. And it's really hard to communicate without somebody whose job it is to make sure that this stuff is going out in all the various channels. So that's been a big piece of the work that we've been doing, as well as mapping the communication landscape and working together. You know, when the Republicans decide they want to get a message out there, it is a top-down structure, right? They say X, and the next day, everybody is using that catchphrase. Everybody is saying it everywhere. Well, I don't think as Democrats we need to be that sort of dramatic about making that happen, but we should be amplifying our messaging and amplifying our voices to work through it. And so this is where mapping those communications channels, where we're working here locally with HDCC and SDCC on candidates, where we work with the governor's office, where we work with the speaker's office and the minority leader's office, where we're working with all the communications directors of our federal elected officials, so we're all pushing in one direction, is incredibly important to be able to do to amplify those messages. And then my goal, too, is to be the progressive and the aggressive voice for our candidates, so that candidates should never go negative, but the party can certainly go negative. And when I mean go negative, it's not personal attacks, it's not being mean-spirited, but it is very clearly pointing out the policy positions of people on the other side of the aisle. And we've been able to do that, I think, quite effectively in the 45th district race, where Monka's opponent, a gal by the name of Jin Young England, has said time after time that she's pro-choice, Except Jin Young forgot to scrub her Twitter feed before she announced to run for office. And so we went back and got all of her tweets from the CPAC conference, the Conservative Political Action Conference, where she sort of denigrated choice and women, where she denigrated families that happened to be divorced, saying their kids were lesser than kids of non-divorced families, and on and on and on. And you can see those things. Now, to me, that's fair game. You say that stuff and then you turn around and say you're the other thing. That's fair game. Don't go after the person, go after the policy positions, and you can stay above the fray to make that happen. Next slide. We also want to make sure that we're building the bench, because again, that's what Republicans have been doing, is really building that bench at school boards, at local city councils, in port races, and municipal races. In fact, here in Olympia, you have a whole set of races, of local races, that I would encourage you to invest in. And I want to put a number in your head. If you've got any dollars in your pocket, the number is $9,000. So I had a chance to meet with a bunch of these candidates earlier today, and that's about what they need if you're looking at the port candidates, the city council candidates, all that sort of work, to be able to get over the edge and try to win these races in the face of some truly heinous work on the other side, on the Republican side. So if you've got a few bucks, send it to the Thurston County Dems. Do it tonight before you leave. Don't send it to the state party. Send it right to the Thurston County Dems and help them out to make that happen. But so every race, every place targets. In 2018, there are 98 House seats that are up, 24 Senate seats. I want to compete in all of them. Doesn't mean we'll win all of them, but I want a great Democrat, somebody who can speak to the values of the Democratic Party, somebody who fits the district. They're talking about these issues. And you've got great folks like Karen and Susan who are willing to go in and lose, and they're going to lose in 2017. They're going to run again in 2018. Probably lose then. They'll probably be back in 2020 as well. And they think that they might win by then, and I think that that's right too. But to be able to start to do that work and get that message out and change the narrative. We also need to look at sort of multi-cycle analysis and execution down to the precinct level. What are voters doing? What are the demographics? What are the issues areas, and how are we talking about that? And then what are those key performance indicators in every legislative district and in every congressional district in the state? Because once we turn the state blue, I don't want to have to have it go red again. I want to be able to watch it and see what's going on, and that we're responding, and that we're really talking to people about all of these issues and races that are important to them. Next slide. So when I took over as state party chair, the state party wasn't in the best of, I would say, financial shape. If you go back 10 years when Paul Barrett was state party chair, the base budget for the party, meaning non-coordinated campaign years, but just regular years and growth, was about $3 million a year. When I took over as state party chair, the budget had declined to $1.2 million a year. So that's a $1.8 million loss of fundraising as a party in doing the work that folks wanted to be able to do. And that meant that we couldn't do as much as we wanted to do with data, with organizing, with helping all of our legislative districts. So my goal was to try to build different fundraising streams than we have before, and to do this in a couple of different ways. One is kind of the old-fashioned way. It's the Risers program. And that's folks who are more of the major donor side of the shop, who are giving and have given quite generously around the state for our communications and data folks. But it was really important to me to also build a people's fundraising stream, these low-dollar donor fundraising streams, people giving, $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month. You can join the Resistance Tonight. That's what it's called as a club if you would like. We'd love that if you did that, because it makes a dramatic difference when people do it. When I started as state party chair, we had something called the Dem Club that people were giving to. And we've had about 200 people giving maybe $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year in the aggregate. Since we started the Resistance, we've gone up to a little over 1,700 people giving $25,000 a month. And that's almost $360,000 a year. With that, it pays for our organizers. And every time we tick that up, we add another organizer around the state. So right now, again, if you look at where those four folks are, one is working the area of the 31st, 30th, 47th, sort of that Western Washington core. We've got one up in the 45th, the Moncadingra's race. We've got another who is in Yakima down to Tri-Cities, because that's an investment area we haven't been to. And then one in Spokane, because we haven't had a staff member in Spokane, I want to say ever, but I might be wrong, but I think like ever. And so Eastern Washington, where we do have opportunity, is a place we want to grow. Getting that organizing muscle in different places around the state is really important. We need more for Pierce County. We need one for Thurston County. We need one for Clark County. We need to be up in Whatcom County as well. So my goal is to get to 8 to 10 folks doing this work. And again, the organizing revenue pays for all of that through the resistance. So this is my last slide, my second to last slide, and then we'll open it up for any questions that folks have. But when we talked to those voters around the state all summer, we were looking for those intersectional issues with voters, not sort of the traditional kind of democratic issues that we consistently lead with sometimes in campaigns. For example, climate change, social justice, women's health care, all of those things are incredibly important. But sometimes that's not the first issue you want to lead with in some of these independent voters. So we were looking for the sort of what are the intersectional issues that it didn't really matter if you skewed really liberal or really democratic, everyone could agree with. And we could or really liberal or really conservative, everyone could agree with. And these are kind of the five that came out of all of that research. The first was more jobs, and pay equity. Or the fact that if you work a 40-hour work week, you should be able to take care of your family based on that pay. And I don't know if folks saw there was an article in the Seattle Times that talked about, a family of four, $76,000 is what you need to be able to make to take care of a family of four in the city of Seattle. I can tell you, there are so many people who do not make $76,000 to take care of their family in the city of Seattle, or frankly outside the city of Seattle, as you start to look at, and I think it was East Side was even more, the East Side suburbs as well was even more. So that's an issue in terms of jobs and pay equity, and everyone looking at that, and it shouldn't be an issue that we're afraid of. Healthcare for all, universal healthcare, single payer, Medicare for all, I don't care how you say it, everybody wants it. And it's kind of ridiculous in this country that we live in that we don't have it, that we don't have basic health care for everyone who lives in this country, and that health care is something that is affordable. And I am fine if we've got a basic plan that covers anybody. If you want champagne in your operating room, well, darn it, go ahead and buy a policy that covers that, right? But if you want to have an operation done in a timely manner, you should be able to have that covered. And it shouldn't be something that bankrupts families and sends people, into despair, frankly. Quality and free public education, not just K through 12, not just pre-K, but all the way through, we say college here, but mostly it's community college that we're talking about that people want, and apprenticeship programs. So incredibly important to talk about apprenticeship programs, especially because we're at a union venue, because that leads to a job and doing the work around a job. And this is all really focused around that. So many parents, and I have 3 kids who are concerned about their own kids being able to find a job and get the training for a job. So many folks who are concerned because their industries are changing and they don't see where that retraining is coming from for a new set of economic jobs. All of these are so important to look at. Affordable housing, I don't care the community, that's an issue. It's also a jobs issue because somebody's building those affordable homes all the way through. And then the last thing that nobody's ever really been talking about that I can tell at the national level, and that's a dignified retirement. Because if you look at the average 401k in this country, or IRA in this country, the amount of money that's in it is $3,500. That's not even a month, right, for most people, $3,500. 56% of American families currently have less than $1,000 in the bank. 56%. That's one, a bad tire really away. That's your dishwasher breaking. That's your kid breaking their arm, and you have to pay an incredible copay for them to be able to go to the hospital, or the remains of what you need to do for that particular bill. So that's something that people are worried about, and they're worried about the 2 programs that underlie that and support it: Social Security and Medicare. And for so many folks in the state of Washington, if there's one message I could get across to them, or want to get across to them, is those are the programs created by Democrats that Democrats will continue to support, and Democrats will make sure that that's there. And if you're voting for a Republican, you are voting to destroy those 2 particular programs that are going to take care of people here in the state of Washington through their retirement, and in fact around the country. So go to the last slide. And I also like to say that there's so much work that's been going on around the country. That one's a little bit hard to read, but it says, it challenges you. What are you doing to take today to take back your government, because it's not Donald Trump's government. It's not the folks who are sitting in the White House right now. It's your government. It's we the people. It's everyone here working together to have the kind of government and have the kind of country that we want along our values. And I do believe that we have a unique opportunity as Democrats this year in 2017, but especially next year in 2018, to make a fundamental change from the swing that's happened, from people's malaise, from people not wanting to get engaged, and to bring people back into the fold of saying, darn it, this is our country. We want a country that looks a certain way, that acts a certain way, that cares for its people with a level of consideration and kindness that currently isn't happening in our country today. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and open it up for any questions that folks might want to have about the Democratic Party. So thank you. Yeah.